ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930 present The Drive.
It is Thursday, February 23rd. Your drive begins now on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. I'm your host, Paul Swann. We are here until 6 o'clock. We'll get your text in this hour, 304-396-TALK. That's 304-396-8255. We got a lot to get into. The Thundering Herd winning last night against... Is James Madison Marshall's new rival? Is this the rivalry we've all been waiting for? It felt like it yesterday. Marshall wins 90-83. And we're going to hear from Tavion Kinsey in a little bit. And we're also going to hear from Dan D'Antoni, get his thoughts on the game. And, of course, we'll get your thoughts as well. That text line, again, is 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. Also, we have got a lot of explaining to do as far as what the scenarios are. There was some confusion yesterday, and I'm hoping I can clear some of that up for you. Let's start with what happened last night. Marshall gets the win, 92-83. So Marshall wins. Well, guess what? Southern Miss lost last night. So now that made Marshall and Southern Miss even in the standings. We were hoping that one of those things would happen. A Marshall win to keep pace, and we were hoping that Southern Miss would lose somewhere. Well, it happened. So now Marshall has to win. If Marshall wins on Friday and Southern Miss wins on Friday, then both teams will be co-champions, regular season co-champions. But for the tiebreaker and the number one seed, it would go down head-to-head, and Marshall wins the head-to-head. Now, that means Marshall would be the number one seed, and that also means Marshall would hold the automatic bid to the NIT. Now, some of you got confused yesterday when I was talking to you on social media. I've seen some of the Facebook groups out there as well. There was some confusion about that. What does that mean? Does that mean that the Sun Belt doesn't get a bid into the NCAA tournament? No, not at all. Not at all. What that means is Marshall, by virtue of winning the regular season crown, and thus if Marshall's the number one seed in the tournament, Marshall would also be awarded the automatic bid to the NIT in the event that Marshall did not qualify for the NCAA tournament. Well, how does Marshall qualify for the NCAA tournament? The quickest way and the automatic way is to win the Sun Belt tournament. The automatic bid is not awarded to. The NCAA automatic bid is awarded to the tournament winner, not the regular season champion. But as a champion, as a regular season champion, Marshall, if not selected by either the committee or by its own hand by winning and punching its own ticket, basically taking care of its business, punching its own ticket, getting into the NCAA tournament. If Marshall doesn't do that and Marshall wins the regular season crown, Marshall gets to go to the NIT and possibly could host a home game. The crowds have been good enough. Marshall could post a fantastic record, lose in the conference championship game, and the NCAA tournament, the selection committee could go, sorry, not strong enough, and then bypass the herd. So what's Marshall to do? Great record, didn't win the tournament. What's Marshall to do? Well, that's where the regular season crown comes in. You win that, you at least guarantee yourself some postseason opportunity. So I'll drill this down. Marshall wins, Southern Miss wins on Friday. Co-champions, Marshall, number one seed, and holding the NIT bid. So Marshall would have the NIT bid if needed. Now, some of you wanted to know, well, what happens if both teams lose? It gets interesting because Louisiana would come into the mix. So if Marshall wins and Southern Miss wins, Marshall, number 1 seed. We got that. We established that. If Marshall loses and Southern Miss loses on Friday, then what happens? We wait to see what Louisiana does, because that would open the door for Louisiana. If Louisiana wins and the other two lose, Marshall and Southern Miss, then Louisiana would be the number 1 seed. Marshall would be the number 2 seed. Southern Miss would be the number 3 seed. You understand that? Because then we got a 3-way tie. We're not in the 2-way tie breaker mode anymore. We're in the 3-way tie. So Marshall loses, Southern Miss loses, Louisiana wins on Friday. Louisiana, they're your number 1 seed, and they get the NIT automatic bid. If Marshall just wins, we don't have to worry about any other scenario. That's all you need to know. If Marshall wins, don't have to worry about anything else. The Herd controls its own destiny at this moment. That's something this team's been fighting for a long time this season. Finally at that point now where Marshall can just go out, handle its business, and win the regular season championship. It might have to share that title with Southern Miss, but more importantly, you get the number 1 seed in the tournament, and you get the automatic NIT bid. I hope that's cleared that up a little bit for you, because I know that was there was some anxiety yesterday. What happens here? What happens there? Marshall wins, all good. If Marshall loses and Southern Miss loses, hope that Louisiana loses. But the easiest way to relieve any tension here is Marshall wins, it's all good. It's absolutely all good. Now, keep this in mind. That only means Marshall can claim the NIT tournament if, and this is if, it doesn't win the tournament, the Sun Belt tournament. And I know some of you are like, no, we're not talking about NIT. Oh, you want this in your back pocket. You want this in your back pocket. Because you don't know what's going to happen in Pensacola. You absolutely don't. So you want to have this in your back pocket. Because this will mean if you need to use it, if you don't win the tournament and don't go to the NCAA tournament by virtue of that automatic bid and you aren't an at-large, you can go to the NIT, which is a tremendous step up from the last tournament Marshall was in. The pay-to-play tournament, I get it. I understand it. I'll cover it. I'll root the Herd on. I don't like it. Marshall won it last time. That was good. I mean, if you're going to be in it, might as well win it. But I don't like it. NIT should be the consolation. Like, okay, NIT. That should be where you stop. Like, okay, if we're not good enough to be in the NIT, then we'll see you next year. But there's some things going in the Herd's favor. Marshall's pretty hot right now. Marshall can clinch the regular season championship. If Marshall gets to the championship game, maybe, just maybe, there's an outside shot. I don't know. I don't think so. The other thing we're going to be watching, of course, is Tavion Kinsey. Right now, Tavion Kinsey has 2,601 points. That passes Skip Henderson's 2,574. John Elmore, Marshall's all-time scoring leader, 2,638 points. So Tavion Kinsey could, theoretically, in one game, get it done. Maybe it's going to take two. But that's where we're at now. So Tavion passes Skip Henderson. Skip Henderson was a tremendous talent and player for the Thundering Herd. Amazing. So now he's up there and ready to pass John Elmore. Something extremely terrible would have to happen for this not to happen. So Tavion Kinsey's right there on the cusp. And we'll hear from him tomorrow about this. Today, though, I want to talk about the game itself when we continue. It was an exciting game, to say the least. Marshall with the win and the Southern Miss loss right there where Herd fans thought Marshall should be. If you win that game at Louisiana, this might be a moot point here. If you lose, you still are in a top 4 seed and you have a shot. But if you win tomorrow, you're in the driver's seat. So I look at that Louisiana game and go, oh, wish the Herd would have won that. You look at that Louisiana Monroe game and go, I wish the Herd would have won that. You look back at that Georgia Southern game and go, man, glad the Herd beat him the second time, but hated to lose that. And I only scratch my head at a couple of these losses. The losses in conference I don't really scratch my head at. JMU, that's a tough team. We found Marshall's new rival, by the way. The way that thing went, their crowd was in it, Herd fans in it, obviously. That's a good matchup. I hope that's going to be hot for many years to come. Yeah, I hope in wrestling terms, I hope there's a lot of heat on that rivalry, that feud, for years to turn. Yeah. Let's get your text in this hour. 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. When we continue, we're going to break this one down. What happened last night? Marshall wins over a hard team to beat in James Madison. We'll break it down. We'll hear from Tavion Kinsey. We'll hear from Dan D'Antoni. And we'll hear from you. All of this coming up on today's edition of The Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.
This is The Drive with Paul Swann on ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930.
Welcome back to the February 23rd edition. The Drive is on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. I'm your host, Paul Swann, and I'm taking your text this hour at 304-396-TALK. 304-396-8255. First up from the text line this evening, Coach D had definitely brought excitement back to Herd basketball. I agree. It's a fun style of basketball. We all admit that. It's up and down. I mean, sure, we would like to see a more physical game, maybe a defensive game. I don't know. What do we want to see? What do we want to see different? We want wins. That's what we want. We want to see Marshall win basketball games. And so far, Marshall has won the majority of its basketball games. So the Thundering Herd is 24-6 now, 13-4 in Sun Belt play, taking on an Old Dominion team that's 18-11 and 10-7 in league play. This is going to be a tough one. This is not a gimme game by any stretch of the imagination, so we'll have that one for you tomorrow here on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. But, yeah, give Dan D'Antoni credit. Remember last year I was taking questions about how long do I think Dan should be here, or is it time for Dan to move on? Remember those conversations? Those were topics and discussions we were having after last season, and the script has been flipped. We're now talking about Dan on the cusp of winning a conference championship. How about that? And if he decided to go out on top like that, that's another way to go. But I think there's some gas left in the tank for Dan D'Antoni. If you win the conference regular season championship, go in and win the conference tournament championship. You can pretty much stay or go if you want to. I think you get to call your shot there. So congratulations to Dan and the Thundering Herd for being close to that regular season championship. And yesterday was an exciting game. Marshall defeating James Madison 92-83. Catching up with Tavion Kinsey after the game, I asked him about that one, said it was a fun one, and he agreed with me.
Man, I just said that. I literally just said that standing on the wall. I said that was probably one of the funnest games I've ever played in. Score keeps switching back and forth, but it just shows how much fight we have. We played as a team. Obina played a great game. He helped us a lot at the end, diving on the floor, getting blocks, getting rebounds. Drew comes alive and makes the shots that he makes that I don't understand how he makes them. And we come out of here with a win, and this is a hard place to win in. And for us to, persevere and get over everything that we went through this game, I'm very excited. But, this road trip's not over.
He understood business trip, road trip's not over, but going back to this one last night, I was curious, did he think that the style of play that both teams tried to play, did he think the style of play favored Marshall?
Definitely. We just did what we do best. We play Marshall basketball. We stick to the script of what we've been doing all season. We didn't change anything. I think we played great as a team. We made, a couple turnovers and a couple mistakes, but we fought through it, and we got through that adversity. And it just shows how strong we are when we stay together. And like you said, this played right into our favor. We got downhill just as we wanted to. We got the shots that we wanted to take. We got our screen and rolls going. We passed the ball a lot this game, so I'm real proud of this team.
Something else Tavion talked about last night when we were asking him about the game, he said that this team's got scorers. Don't have to worry about that. This team's got scorers. Anybody on this team can go out there and have a night and score on you. But he said that their main focus, especially with this one, was defense.
We know we got a million guys all the way, even our bench. Everybody can score the ball. We're never worried about that. We're never worried about who's going to or anything. Everybody can score. Our main focus is defense, and that's what it's been all year. That's what's either lost us the game or that's what's either won us the game. So for us to be in this environment that we were, they had a great crowd, new gym. One of the leaders in, attendance here. For us to just lock in, it was real loud. For us to just communicate and be on one accord on defense, it was real big in the second half towards the end of the game.
So let's talk about the big thing. Marshall scoreboard watching. After the game, they were looking up because they were able to see what was happening. And here it is. Southern Miss gets beat. So that means everything's all tied up in the standings. Opening the door for Marshall. Marshall can win its next game and win at least a share of the Sun Belt regular season championship. And that means, by virtue of tiebreaker, will be the number one seed in the tournament. It's not over. Tavion Kinsey recognizes that. He said there was no pressure at all. He said this trip is not over.
No pressure at all. We're going to go and do exactly what we've been doing. We're going to walk in there just like we walked in here with energy. We're going to make sure our guys is ready. We're well rested. This trip's not over. We take every game one game at a time. We have our motto 1-0. And this is just another game coming up on Saturday. I know it's more at stake, but as long as we don't, put pressure on ourselves and just go out there and play the game, I think we can get the job done. I'm more than confident that we can get the job done.
Just to clarify, it's a Friday game. These guys are used to Thursday, Saturday, so this is a Friday game that we'll have here on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. And one final thing from last night talking to Tavion Kinsey, he said there's no pressure at all. You heard that. This is a business trip. But he does also understand that now, here we are once again, the target is on the backs of the Thundering Herd.
We're going to be the ones walking in there with a target on our back. It's going to be a tough game. We don't expect any calls. We don't expect anything to really go our way. We just got to come in there and play through everything just as we did today. Allow Coach Dan to deal with the refs. He does a great job at that. And like I said, just playing our game, doing what we do best. And I think we should walk out of here, with a conference championship or
Tavion Kinsey last night, Marshall's victorious 92-83 from the text line. ODU shot their shot beating Southern Miss. The Herd will thunder on ODU. Going to be a good one. I hope you're right. That should be a challenging game tomorrow. What if we get another one of these 92-83 type games and the Herd's on top of that? That would be fun. And then Marshall doesn't have to play until a week from tomorrow or Saturday, a week from Saturday. So Marshall wins tomorrow. Doesn't have to play until next following Saturday anyway. But you get to be the number 1 seed. How about that? The double bye, the number 1 seed, regular season conference champion, first year in the Sun Belt. How about that? That's pretty good for Dan D'Antoni, that last year could not muster that many wins on the season, and that a lot of people wanted to run out of town. I don't know if it was just a vocal minority, just a vocal group of fans. Displeasure, of course, is always going to go with the territory, but last year there were so many people that were saying, hey, is it time for Dan to go? And look, the Thundering Herd's on the doorstep of a conference championship. Marshall hasn't had a conference championship in a long while. Southern Conference was the last time it was an actual outright conference championship in the regular season. You go into the Mid-American Conference and you've got those divisional titles. And so it's been a while since Marshall's been able to claim one of these, claim a conference regular season crown, and get yourself into the NIT if need be. So let's hope the Herd can get it done tomorrow. We'll hear from Dan D'Antoni when we continue. We've got your text coming in, 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. More coming up on today's edition of The Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.
We're taking Paul Swann everywhere. Download or subscribe to The Drive with Paul Swann on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Make sure if you are getting your podcast on Apple Podcasts, you hit the subscribe, follow button. Same thing with Spotify. The more that we have following, the more that it helps others find the show, and it helps me as well. I do appreciate everyone who downloads the show. This is The Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. I'm your host, Paul Swann. Let's go back to the text line before we hear from Coach D'Antoni, and it's 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. This texter says, I still believe D'Antoni should go. Lucky year for him. He can't coach. That's some great luck there. I'm going to honestly say to you, is it better to be good or is it better to be lucky? I don't know. But if he's lucky, he's 24-6 lucky. I want to be 24-6 lucky. Absolutely want that kind of luck. Now, if you want to make an argument about the regular season, having some teams on it that maybe were a little easy, okay, we could talk about the Coppin State and the Chicago State and the Morehead State games in the world here. We can talk about that. But I honestly believe that I don't know if you can luck your way through the entire conference season. I don't know if you can. You're free to disagree, and we'll take those at 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. But I don't know. I don't know if you can luck your way to a 24-6 record. I don't know if I believe in that kind of luck. If that's the case, I'm going to talk to Dan tomorrow and see if I can get some lucky numbers. And what I do with them will be my business, but I'm going to go see if I can talk to Dan and get some lucky numbers. Speaking of Dan, the head coach of the Thundering Herd last night, always in a good mood, especially after a victory. And the one thing that he always talks about the games is, was it fun for the fans? And he said this one was fun for the fans. And he said the winner here, because he was asked about this game, Coach, do you believe the first to 100 was going to win the game? And Dan responded by saying that the winner of the game was really the fans.
Well, that fits their style too. They were for a long time one of the leaders in scoring. So it's both our style. The winner was the fans. It's the hell of a game. It's a fun game to watch, spectate, fun game to coach. So, we just got the breaks toward the end a little bit. And, two teams are that closely matched, and you get a little run toward the end of the game. Guess what? You win. So real happy with our defense second half, though. I thought, they shot like, I think 30, and what they shoot, 34 and 37 second half. And that was the difference. And Obina and Micah Hanlock. And although we had to piece that position together a little bit, but Jacob and White and Goran came in and gave us a little bit of reprieve till we got them back in there. And then I thought defensively, Obina especially, but Micah too, kind of cut down a little bit on their scoring. We get a little burst from it, and of course Tavion, Andy, and just super good. And it went on a big ball game. It was a big ball game. It was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. It's a good one to win, too. And on top of that, Southern Miss losing, setting up the Thundering Herd for an opportunity at that conference championship. So that is what's next on Friday. That's not lost on the head coach, Dan D'Antoni.
You go down to ODU. What is a rival? They're playing better now, early. They're later. They're coming on. So, boy, it's going to be a battle, especially after they're home. We got to get on the road 3 hours, drive bus down there. But, it does mean a lot. And, again, I can promise the Marshall fans this. I promise you a win or a loss. But I'm going to say this. We'll have our best effort on the floor. How that works out, I don't know. But we're going to give it our best effort. Certainly would be good to go in with the number 1 seed.
Dan D'Antoni, optimistic that the Thundering Herd can get that win and be the number 1 seed. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're all hoping for tomorrow. Marshall to win this. So that means Marshall becomes a champion, a regular season champion. Job's not done. And then what that also means is, honestly, what that also means is Marshall has momentum going into this tournament. Marshall supposedly has the easiest path to the championship. And this restores a little bit more of that Marshall basketball prestige. Don't you think? You win a regular season championship, you start to see some of that prestige come back. If Marshall can start replicating this, and you got to get the first one, obviously, then if Marshall can start replicating the success, we're going to start seeing some of that Marshall basketball prestige truly come back. And it doesn't hurt that you have an all-world player like Tavion Kinsey on your roster who's about ready to become the all-time leading scorer for the Thundering Herd. So you've got a lot of things going in your favor. The text line is 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. More coming up on this edition of The Drive, ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.
This is The Drive with Paul Swann on ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930.
Welcome back. It's the final segment of today's edition of The Drive, February 23rd edition here on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. I'm your host, Paul Swann. We're getting your text in 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. From the text line, very good question. Do you know the reason why these two games are being played on Wednesday and Friday instead of the usual Thursday and Saturday? Well, if you look at the schedule for the conference championship, the tournament schedule, the tournament gets underway on Tuesday, February 28th. And so if Marshall, for example, played on one of those early games and Marshall was going to have to play on the 25th, so if Marshall plays on Saturday, Marshall would then have to play on Saturday, travel if Marshall was in one of these first games. You've got Sunday, Monday, off you go. You're playing in the tournament on Tuesday. So instead, I know it's one more day, but it's one more day. So everything wraps up on Friday. Then the teams that have to be in Pensacola to start off the tournament, the 12 and the 13 seed, the 11 and the 14 seed will meet on the 28th. Those teams would have an extra travel day since the Sun Belt tournament begins a week earlier than some of the other tournaments, and that's for the men. On the women's side, it's the same story, and they're trying to be consistent as well with these tournaments. So if you're not that familiar with the Sun Belt tournament, the tournament schedule, you've got 4 teams that, and I don't want to call them play-in games, but you have 4 teams that will play on the 28th. And then those winners will play part of the bracket on March 2nd. So you have 4 games on March 2nd. 2 games on the 28th for the men, 4 games featuring the 2 winners from those games. And then the double bye comes in because Marshall won't have to play until Saturday, March 4th. So that's how it breaks down for the men. So if Marshall was not fortunate to have a double bye or even a single bye, Marshall would have to turn right around and play on the 28th. And there's still games to be played on the women's side as well. They're going to play on Tuesday, the 28th. Women are going to play also on Wednesday, March 1st, Friday, March 3rd, then Sunday, March 5th, and Monday, March 6th. This tournament is spread out. Pretty good, huh? Get this thing started early and get this thing going. You don't have to sit around and wait too long. Marshall gets to enjoy the double bye, so that means you get a week off. I'm good with it. I hope that explained everything for you. I like this tournament. I really do. I like how this tournament is played. It's going to be played with the men and women. Both the men and women are going to be given equal importance. So and it sure beats having a curtain in between 2 courts in a football practice facility. A very good, very fine football practice facility, but a football practice facility nonetheless. Back to the text line. Danny will have 4 of the top 10 scorers in Marshall history, according to this texter's comments. Has brought excitement to the Henderson Center and Herd fans on the road. People complaining is just part of life. If you had a 35 or 45-year-old coach go 24-6 and have the last regular season game to win the conference, they would be out of here. If you personally don't like Danny, please find another team. And that is from Parker. I don't know. People are going to complain about anything. I get that. And you know what? We like differing opinions. I'm going to be the first one to tell you. If you have an opinion that is different than mine or anyone else's, I'm here for it. Absolutely. I'm never going to say, hey, look, you can't have that opinion, or my opinion's right, or your opinion's wrong. Okay, I might say that now and then. You know me. But in all seriousness, if we're going to do opinions here, I mean, people are going to disagree. There are some people that think that Danny just got lucky, and they don't believe, they think this is fool's gold. And I get that. I understand that. I respect that. You know, if Danny shows consistency and keeps winning and keeps winning and keeps winning, then the naysayers won't have much to say, right? Honestly, it's what you do consistently. You're not going to win a championship every year, but if you're consistently competing for a championship, and even then, fans want championships every single year. You can't sustain that every single year. Even Nick Saban can't win you a championship every single year. So the Thundering Herd on the cusp of winning a conference championship in the regular season, I think that's a good year for Dan D'Antoni. But I will say this, if you disagree and think that there needs to be a change, you have an opportunity to voice that with me. And you look at the top scorers in Marshall history. You have John Elmore. You have Tavion Kinsey. Those are 2 of the top scorers in Marshall history. Texture said Danny will have 4 of the top 10 scorers in Marshall history. So, number 1's John Elmore. Number 2 is Tavion Kinsey. Then you have number 6 at C.J. Burks. That's pretty good. That is pretty good for the Thundering Herd. Oh, yeah, I forgot one, didn't I? I apologize. I absolutely forgot one. So we have, because again, we got to count we got to count Ryan Taylor. So Elmore, Kinsey, C.J. Burks, he's 6. And then we got to count Ryan Taylor. How about that? All right. Our text line one more time, 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. Does the Sun Belt tournament stretch out over 2 weeks? No, it will start on Tuesday. So it starts on Tuesday, and then it will work its way for a week. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So you've got a potential of 5 games for a team if it has to start on Tuesday. So, I mean, technically, it starts in 1 week and it ends in the start of another week. But the women's basketball tournament starts on Tuesday, February 28th, and it ends on Monday, March 6th. The men, same schedule. And these are I don't want to call them the play-in games. Just you have to play that first day. If you're one of these bottom seeds, you got to play that first day. And again, it's Tuesday, February 28th, all the way to March 6th. Also from the text line, Andy should come back. Andy should come back. I agree. Andy should come back. And hopefully Andy will work his way up into the top 10. Wouldn't that be something? Points are Elmore, Kinsey, Skip Henderson, John Taft, Walt Wallowak, C.J. Burks, Russell Lee, J.R. Van Hoos, Tamar Slay, Ryan Taylor. Pretty good, huh? That's a pretty good top 10. Let's get the sheriff up there. We're gonna get him in here. He's got some ways to go to crack the top 15. Andy Tonkovich is number 15 with 1,578. All right, send all errors, corrections, and factual mistakes to my Twitter account at Paul Swann. You can text me here. I'll be back with you tomorrow. We'll review all the things that we got right and wrong. We'll do it together here on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.
WRBC Huntington, W227BS Huntington, your flagship home of the Marshall Thundering Herd and The Drive with Paul Swann, ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930.